Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Petruccelli of the New York Interconnect, a joint venture between Altice, Charter, and Comcast. I'm privileged to be joined by a friend and colleague who is a leader in the automotive industry. He has graciously agreed to talk with us today and share his valuable insight on the advertising landscape within the automotive vertical. I promise this conversation will be insightful and showcase the evolving TV media landscape and how that impacts advertisers, identify the challenges facing the auto industry today, such as supply chain disruption, and why the future is still bright for auto sales. I am pleased to welcome Vice President, Media Director of Mediahub Global, Ken McCallum.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Star of the show.
Well, I didn't know Erin was in front of me, so you guys are all going to be disappointed after this because she's a lot smarter than I am.
Well, let's jump in. The auto industry has always been and continues to be a leading driver, no pun intended, in the advertising ecosystem. Can you speak to the trends auto has had to navigate in the ever-changing environment?
Well, that's kind of a big question. There's a lot to unload on that, especially in the last couple years. Why don't we just start with the bird's eye view right now? What you're looking at the auto industry right now. We're facing a lot of supply disruption, as everyone knows, semiconductors, and how that's hitting it. I saw an article from one of the economists over at General Motors a couple weeks ago, talking about the natural demand of the United States right now, or the North America, is about 17 million units. We have the capacity with our current supply chain to produce about 14.5 million units. So that leaves about 2.5 million unsatisfied potential customers out there. What that means to an OEM is if the average, looking at the entire industry, average vehicle costs about $40,000, 2.5 million, that's $100 billion in lost revenue, or about 5 or 6 billion in lost profits for the manufacturers combined, for everybody except Tesla, they just making boatloads of money. But what that means is now the OEMs have to adjust their mix a little bit. So people are saying that prices aren't going up, but what they're doing is building richer contented vehicles, which have more profit in them naturally. So the average transaction price of the vehicles in last year have more than doubled, so the manufacturers are building more expensive vehicles, selling those to the dealers. They're also cutting back on incentives, because if you already have 2.5 million more people shopping for cars than there's supply for, they don't have to incentivize as much, so that drives the costs up a little bit further. And then they're going to cut back on things like advertising a little bit. So we have to be much more selective and targeted in how and where we invest, because we still need to advertise, but it is trying to nitpick and dig out that high value audience, that person that's in market that's going to pay the premium for the vehicles right now, and consequently. So as I said, there was about another 2.5 million people that are looking for cars that were maybe typical value shoppers. That put pressure or increased the used car market. So there's the whole profit center on the used cars and service things. So the people who are really making the money are the dealers right now. So I just saw Lithia, which is one of the larger auto companies. They have about 200 dealerships in the country. They just posted their Q1 profits of $322 million for Q1, which is double their record profits from the previous quarter of last year as well. So the dealers are doing surprisingly very well, and they're not discounting vehicles. So as advertisers, you're seeing more brand advertising versus offers, price-based advertising. You're seeing us advertising used cars, which we've never done before. And also talking about more services versus the vehicle. So kind of differentiate yourself. Less lease offers, because right now, since the manufacturer's not incentivizing leases, you're seeing advertising. If you're seeing any leasing advertising, you're seeing it like a $7,000 or $8,000 do-it signing, which is kind of a turnoff for customers, I think, or the typical customer.
That leads me to my next question. In the height of the pandemic, we saw the auto category constrict, and certain brands pulled back their advertising and still have done today for other reasons. But as you just mentioned, the industry is grappling with this ongoing supply chain disruption and various other supply issues. In both scenarios, I'm proud to be partnered with you because you advised your clients to stay visible. And can you elaborate on why that's so important in the auto industry and specifically why that's important in New York?
Yeah. Well, I represent Acura as far as my clients goes, and we're a premium manufacturer. So, which actually only has 4 core vehicles in our pipeline. If I look at those competitive sets, we have about 16 competitive manufacturers and about 60 competitive models that you're looking at. So relevancy is critical. So the consumer has an option to go anywhere they want. When you get into the premium segment, like most customers really don't care if they buy an Audi, an Acura, a Lexus. They all kind of do the purpose. So the critical piece is to be the top 2 or 3 in consideration for the customer. So when he starts shopping, that you want him to search your brand or one other brand, because after you get to that 3rd or 4th shop, you see a huge diminishing returns. The customer just is going to get satisfied. If their first choice is a BMW or an Acura, they're going to do their best to kind of do the research and find that best offer. So if you're not in that consideration set, then you're just missing out on an opportunity. If they're gonna you're gonna miss your opportunity right there. So relevancy is critical. Frequency equals conversion, especially in the retail world. And so we have to be there, and we have to be in front of that customer before he starts shopping. So it's top of mind, we're there. So with the pandemic, we saw it as an opportunity. I remember this vividly. It was a long time ago, 2 years ago, but we were presenting real time a Q2 and Q3 plan to the clients and the plan was to go to the SEC tournament right after. And while we're presenting, the clients are like, they just walked out in halftime. The game's over. Everything's canceled. We're all going home. So we regrouped and looked at it, and we saw it as an opportunity. So we knew, as you said, other advertisers backed out, and actually not just in the auto segment, like multiple categories. So the price points dropped. So there was value in the market at the time. So instead of pulling back, we doubled down. And we knew eventually things were going to open up. And so we built in that demand. Our dealers did a great job of talking to their current customers. We introduced them to some competitive owners who weren't really talking to their customers then. So when the showroom opened up in August, we actually hit like a 22% market share for that month and just jumped like 10 points. It was off the charts, and we held on to most of it. So now, because it's a lot easier to keep a customer than it is to conquest a customer, and it was value shopping at that time. So we did everything we could to conquest, get them shopping, stay relevant, and found which search terms and keywords and who backed out, and we just doubled down on those terms. So it paid dividends for us.
And convert people to Acura.
Yeah. Fortunately, yes.
So, as we both know, the media landscape is continuously evolving. More than ever, people are consuming their content however they want across multiple screens when it's ready for them. So, at NYI, the New York Interconnect, we capture audiences however and wherever they're watching. And as a brand leader, someone leading the client side of Acura, can you share your expertise on why a holistic media campaign is so important to drive the consumer through the buying journey?
Exactly. Now the more than ever, too, is because, as I talked about, that budgets are kind of more difficult right now, pulling back. So we have to do more with our dollar or our pennies, I should say. And so we do a great job in identifying that high value audience. We're using partners, Axiom, Zeta Global, to really hone in. And then we actually can cross-reference that audience with set-top box data at New York Interconnect to really speak to that high value audience. And it's no secret formula compared to any other manufacturer. They're doing the same thing. So it's how do we become more relevant to that person's time and on his device. So we know he's doing different things. So we just have to, we're not speaking to the device, we're speaking to the person as becoming more relevant to them. So that's, so as you said, is we have to be where they are, kind of be annoying. Just be there. He sees us, he sees Acura, he sees our logo, he sees something, and some kind of reminder, some kind of recall. And that person's eventually, we already know this person's buying history, that he's close, he's near market. So as I said, frequency equals conversion. We just have to be there with a relevant message that converts him, that he's just going to shop and then go on to a dealer website, and so they can retarget them and do the same thing. So and eventually they'll pick up the phone and call.
Yeah, I was just going to say, pre-pandemic, we were in a period where consumer shopping behavior was drastically shifting, where research was being done away from going to in-person dealerships. I think the stat was the average person was visiting 1.2 dealerships before making a purchase.
Yeah.
Well, accelerate that with what we went through over the last 2 years, and you're having a significant amount of research done, I mean, prior to the point of purchase. So having a holistic campaign, I know we partner on various platforms, whether that's across the full New York DMA using data-driven linear or an addressable one-to-one relationship. It's extremely important because you've said to me multiple times, you have to be able to hit them at that top part of their journey when they're in the activation stage, so that when they get to the point of purchase at the lower part of the funnel, they're already thinking Acura. They're there and they're ready to walk into a dealership and make a purchase.
And you're right. It's because data drives everything. Data drives your decisions, and the more information we have, the better decisions we can make. And so we measure the same things that everybody else does. Completed views, CPIs, CPCs, everything. Search data, our website metrics, everything. We analyze everything.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to dive into. The evolution of data and measurement. Both have become integral parts of an advertising campaign, not just within the auto segment, but especially within the automotive, the highly competitive automotive industry. As you compete for market share, and I know that when you doubled down early on in the pandemic, you guys gained a significant jump, and you've maintained that to a consistent level, even with the ongoing supply issues. But can you elaborate on the value of using data to identify that audience? Because that's where it all originates. And at the New York Interconnect, in our partnership with Acura, the goal here is, how do we find that audience and capture them no matter what they're viewing and when they're viewing it? So how do we identify the audience, deliver a more targeted media campaign, and then execute measurement on the back end that wraps it all up and quantifies it for your client?
Well, I actually think you're getting into what data is relevant at that time, because that's always changing. Everything's evolving. Before the pandemic, one of the bigger pieces of information we would lean to were store visits, because you could, once you tag a phone, we can geo-target every dealership in the market, all 25 of them, and we can actually geo-target competitive dealerships, and we can do all that fun stuff. So we know where that customer's been. And if they walk in the showroom, and as you said, before the pandemic, by the time someone actually walks into a showroom, the likelihood of them actually purchasing a vehicle was 80%, 85%, because they've already done all the research, they already knew all their information and stuff. But now, within the pandemic, that's all moved online, and there's a trend to push away from actually dealers, and the trend is home delivery. And so the customer never actually has to step in a showroom. They're pretty close, but they still haven't figured out how to do the complete financing online. You basically have to sign the paperwork at some point. And so because of that, that's what we leaned before. But now we're looking at, different metrics have become available. So instead of looking at all the optimization pieces of it, we're, as Acura, we're starting to lean into, attention metrics, trying to figure out, because as we talked about the high value audiences, finding their time, what is the most efficient and best way to grab that person's attention and optimize to the best inventory, sizes, spaces, models. And so we've partnered with Adelaide to work on some, and we're starting to work on the AUs, and that's playing big dividends for us too. So we can actually be more predictive than reactive.
Yeah, I mean, the old adage of, an impression's an impression, yet all impressions aren't created equal.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I know over the last number of years, we've infused data as much as possible in our campaign. And we've also had the privilege of taking the execution journey through the KPI of delivering data. And one of those attribution studies we do from deterministic exposure data we get from our MVPD partners is to be able to do a location study. And like you said, using that phone, we're able to pinpoint, they were exposed to an ad and then they went to a dealership. And it's a little big brothery, I'm not gonna lie. The fact that you have all these, the cell phone in your pocket is sharing information you don't even know. But all in all, it allows consumers to get more intelligent and more efficient. Um, I do have a question that I always love when we talk about this, because you sit in a unique position and that you get to work with fun people like me, but you also manage the client. So especially in the last 2 years, where basically the world has been flipped upside down, how do you take what's readily available in the ecosystem, the media landscape, and bring that to your client to help affect change and get them to buy into what you guys are trying to activate?
Well, I've been fortunate to be, or unfortunate, however you want to be in the automotive segment for 25 years. So, however you want to look at it, but right now, working with this Acura client, it's been very easy, very fortunate. There's times where you have to pull the client along and saying, "Hey, this," when I first started, we spent hours trying to convince the dealers just that the internet was a real thing, and it's you need to be there, and and talking to them about search and everything else, and fortunately, these dealers and these clients in Torrance are very innovative, very progressive. So there doesn't take a lot of convincing for them to do, and they're they like to try new things. And Acura is actually one. I think they're the first brand that we, and I think Mediahub too is Mediahub has an agency in the metaverse, and Acura just built a showroom in the metaverse as well, just to try out different things because we don't know what it is, but it's going to be something. And why not, while the price of entry is low, and experiment and do some different things and see where it takes us. So they're a client that's not afraid to test, and if they get it wrong, oh well. They tried, and but sometimes we get it right, and you get there early, and you grab your unfair share of someone else's attention at that time. So
Do they allocate certain funds towards what they would call foundational pieces versus the part that is beta
yeah,
testing?
I mean exactly. I mean, for me, with the budgets that I control, 75 to 80% of my budget just goes to the foundational stuff, the tried and true tested. About 15% of it goes to new things that that's out there that you're going to optimize. If it works, you put it into the foundation, and if it doesn't, you kind of pull it out, and then you put a percentage on the bright and shiny, like the metaverse and things like that, just to say you're there. So yeah, so you kind of allocate, but the majority of your budget goes to that, and actually when you're working with clients too, that something's not as efficient, but it's they have a friend that they force you into it. So you still have to put budget aside because you still have to support their bad decisions.
Sometimes we like those friends.
Yes.
Okay, so before we go, what would you say are the most important takeaways from today's conversation about advertising in the auto industry? And I will add, what do you think's next? I mean, what is the play on EV? I mean, let's go with the first
Okay.
question, and then we'll
Well,
circle back.
I mean, in the auto space, as I think we touched on earlier, is just relevancy. Customers have so many options, and the quality of the cars and the products are pretty equal, especially when you get into the premium space. They're fairly connective and things. So it's just being in front of finding that right customer or that right audience and speaking to them, not their device, and staying relevant to them to when they are ready to go into market. You're in their consideration piece of it. That's the top line. So that requires an always-on type schedule. You just, regardless of the economy or headwinds, you still have to be there. Still have to be relevant because there is always, the industry is not shutting down. It's going to have its challenges, but you have to be ready when the customer's ready more than anything else. Second part is what's next. So we didn't touch upon electric. We did not talk about electric at all, but that is obviously the next big thing. It's especially as fuel prices are increasing and technology gets better, battery technology is better, so you have people are more confident in reliability, and you're seeing partnerships going on. So by 2030, I think about over 50% of the vehicles for sale will be electric, or some kind of or pure electric vehicles. And by 2035, half the vehicles on the road will be electric. So that's where it is, and that's gonna, that's another whole nother topic you can talk about, because that's going to drive like downwind industries into turmoil. I look at things like Jiffy Lube, in that pace of where Blockbuster was in the late 90s is, electric cars don't need oil changes. So how are they going to pivot? What are they going to, how are they going to stay relevant? So that's going to create an entire another economy and set of challenges and opportunities for things on the electric front. And then as far as advertising goes, I think it is going to be fun investigating and growing into the metaverse, because that has unlimited potential, and it is where the internet was in like 94, 95. People talking about it being a fad. It may be, it might not be, it might be the huge thing. And you're seeing a lot of brands testing right now in different categories, the fashion side, the music, all kinds of stuff. So that's going to be a fun one to watch and be involved in. And if it goes somewhere, it'll be it's that, I don't know, the people who play Dungeons and Dragons when they're kids. This is their dream.
Hey, no shots fired. All right, some of us didn't date in high school. Relax. Hey, by the way, I'm also using that moment to show what little I dated in high school and reveal that to also say we're going to be at time. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure you close with the great parts. I just wanted to say that last piece.
Awesome. So, well, thank you so much for joining me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope everyone joining us today had as much fun as I did. I'm going to leave you with this. The media and auto landscape is rapidly changing, so buckle up and get ready.
See what you did there. All right.
The puns. Yeah.
All right. Perfect.